Coming up on today's episode of Parasport Nation, paracyclist and doctor of kinesiology Keely Shaw joins the show to talk about her career in cycling and her pursuit in sport nutrition. Let's get started.
Welcome to Parasport Nation with Alex Smyth and Nathan Clement.
Hello and welcome in, Alex Smyth, as always, and joined by Nathan Clement. And Nathan, another episode, another team member of yours. We're really burning through that roster on the paracycling side of things, aren't we?
Oh yeah, we are. We got a few more we have lined up already. So this is going to be the number one paracycling show for years to come. But I'm really excited for people to be able to listen and hear Keely Shaw, as I've been able to get to know her over the last couple of years, and she is just an absolutely remarkable person and leader in the sports sense. And there's no need to wait around for it. Let's go to two-time Paralympic medalist, Dr. Keely Shaw.
Keely, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to get a chance to talk a little bit parasport.
Yeah, so before we get into your background and connection with nutrition, I want to find out a bit more about your background with paracycling. How did you get first introduced and involved with the sport?
So growing up, I was a hockey player. I did a lot of other things. I was motocross, I played volleyball, I played badminton, but riding bikes is actually not something I ever did any more than the average person, average kid on the farm riding a bike. But I got hurt when I was 15. I have a brain injury. So I'm a clinical hemiplegic. Half my body doesn't work quite the way it should, so playing hockey can be kind of challenging. But I kept trying to go back to playing hockey, and I found it really frustrating just because I was constantly comparing myself to the athlete I used to be. And then I was working out at the gym at the university one day during my undergrad degree, and a classmate came up to me, Erica Gavel, she's a wheelchair basketball player, and she said, "I've heard your story, I've seen how you move. Are you interested in parasport?" She starts telling me about all these great aspects and all the things you can do, all the opportunities to travel, all the great things that we know as athletes come with parasport. And I was sold right away. So I went with her to see her sports scientist, and he kind of said, pick a sport. And I already had a bike that I'd been using to commute back and forth to the university on. So I was like, I've got the base equipment. I'll try it out on my $200 steel frame Canadian Tire bike. And then when I finished my undergraduate degree in 2016, I bought myself my first good proper road bike. I entered my first race in May of 2017. And from the second I took the starting line, I fell in love. It was like everything that I missed about hockey, I found again in cycling. The community, the camaraderie, the brute physicality, the feeling of pushing myself.
Keely, you've had definite success in cycling. What has the experience been like, one, winning a medal in Tokyo, but also coming back in Paris and getting on that podium again?
It's funny how typically people see me, they see my career, and they unabashedly say success, had undoubtful success. But the funny thing is I've lost a lot more races than I've won. But I've happened to turn it on at the right time. And being fortunate enough to bring home a few different world championship medals, bring home 2 different Paralympic medals. And it's funny because I find it hard to believe that Tokyo and Paris were technically the same type of event, that they were both Paralympic Games, because they were such different events. Obviously, with Tokyo occurring during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was my first games, didn't really know what to expect. And we kind of went into it with high hopes, but very cautious hopes. We didn't necessarily know what was going to happen. My first Paralympic Games. And then I kind of was, I don't know if I would say I took people by surprise, but I was able to come out on top in something that I never dreamed, I never allowed myself to hope of podiuming in Tokyo. And then Paris was a quote unquote proper Paralympic Games with the pandemic mostly behind us, full stadiums, full stands, families there, friends there. And that one was very strange because I felt a lot of pressure on myself, that pressure to defend my medal. And I knew I could, but I also knew it was going to take everything I had. And whereas I was able to go into my bronze medal match in Tokyo with kind of a, well, let's see what happens. I remember sitting on the start line for my Paris event, looking at my coach and saying, I don't think I can do this. The girl I was racing against had bested me in our last 2 meetings in that event. And he kind of looked at me, my coach Seb, and said, I think you can do it. What's the worst that's going to happen? Nobody's going to die because of the outcome of this race. And sure enough, we were able to get on the bike and I did what I went there to do, and I brought home a bronze medal. And again, extra sweet having beat the girl who had bested me in the last 2 meetings.
That's got to be such a great feeling as you described, just being going in there. I find it very interesting too that, you went from having the pressure off in that first kind of Paralympics in Tokyo to, now you're feeling all the pressure, trying to defend your medal, trying to achieve it. Was that part due to the fact that there were the crowds there, or was it the fact that you had medal that first time? It's like, now you're defending, you're not kind of coming in a bit of an unknown into the Paralympic kind of scene, but you've established, you've medaled, so now there's a kind of target on your back?
I would say it's definitely more the latter. I went in with the goal of not only defending but upgrading the color of my medal. Obviously, I did not upgrade the color of my medal, and I was actually quite disappointed with that at first. Until I was talking to people and they were like, Keely, do you realize how few people defend Paralympic medals? It's hard to win a medal once. It's really hard to do it again 4 years later. So it was really great to have those people around me to kind of shift my thinking and show me that just because I didn't improve the color of my medal doesn't take away from the accomplishment of winning a medal.
One of the most impressive things, especially since I've gotten to know you and have you as a teammate, is just your work ethic, whether that's on the bike. And you mentioned that you've lost more than you won, but you've also been quite strong on the bike, whether it's on the track, picking up world championship medals, or at World Cup events, World Cups on the road, winning medals there as well. What do you think, or what do you believe that leads to that consistency on the bike for you?
I think that consistency really comes down to, one, having a really great communication, a really good relationship with my coach, so that we can have those honest conversations and say, what are we focusing on? Are we at a point in life, at a season in life, where we can focus on both? Or saying, you know what, I was supposed to go for a ride today and I need a day off. And not being scared to say I need a day off, and my coach not questioning it at all. But I think it also is about just showing up day in and day out. The saying goes, the greatest in the world are great at being consistent. It's that consistency that matters. It's that showing up every day that matters, and thinking about what we can do in the next 24 hours to push us closer towards our goals. Obviously, when I'm focusing on both the track and the road, that can get really overwhelming when I'm thinking that I need to PB in a sub 4 minute event. I need to go 50 kilometers an hour here, but I also need to be able to hold 40 kilometers for an hour. And there just can be a lot, and it can be overwhelming. And then you almost get paralysis by analysis. Whereas by just taking it one day at a time, trusting the process, and communicating well with Seb, my coach, I think we were able to do something pretty special.
Does your preparation change at all, whether you're preparing to compete on the track or on the road, or is it still the same mentality? You're breaking things down, you're focusing in on what's in front of you, as you mentioned, or do you have to kind of tweak and adjust how you're preparing for a race given the venue or the where you're going to be racing on?
So I would say it's quite similar from a macro perspective, but there are some micro differences depending on the event. Again, my track event my best is 3 minutes and 45 seconds. You do not have time to make a mistake. One mistake will lose the race for you. So you need to be dialed in right away. You need to be all out, full gas right from the get-go. And it's really just trying to manage how fast you die, really. At the end of the race, I'm just trying to stay on the bike. The bike is driving me at that point. Whereas on the road, where the races are a little bit longer, you have time to settle in. And it's actually really important to stay calm, to stay composed in those first couple kilometers when you're excited and you just want to go. Because if you go too hard, too fast, you're going to run out of matches by the end. So the mentality is a little bit different from the go, go, go right off the start that we experience in track, to just really trying to take a couple deep breaths, stay calm, and stick to the plan on the road to make sure that by the time your 30-minute time trial is up, or your 45-minute time trial, or however long it is, you've still got some gas in the tank to finish strong.
Speaking of preparation, as you have your doctorate in kinesiology, especially on the sports nutrition side of things, how has really understanding and learning more about on the nutrition side of things helped you in your cycling career, or just how you take on everyday life?
It's funny because people often, when I say that I was doing my PhD and racing bikes, so that I completed my PhD, I defended 6 days after Pan Am Games, they kind of look at me like I am insane. But the truth is, I think doing my doctorate training, my graduate training, made me a better cyclist. And being a cyclist made me a better grad student. By being able to dive in and having the freedom to truly go deep and learn about nutrition and how nutrition can be used to benefit to fuel performance was a huge benefit to me when it came to training. Even my more basic exercise science training was super beneficial because I knew enough to be able to ask the right questions. If something felt weird, I could talk to my strength coach and say, what is your goal? And then we could have a conversation about whether or not it was working. Or if I hated an exercise, I would say, could I do this instead? It's going to achieve the same goals. So we were able to I was able to have really good conversations with my support staff, my support team, in order to find what was going to work best for me as an individual athlete. So it made communication a little bit easier, but it also gave me the freedom, again, to explore. I knew the questions to ask, whether I was doing a research review or I was talking to the sport team, which I think was really beneficial, particularly when we talk about parasport, where there's really not any solid research on it. And it takes a little bit of mental gymnastics to try to figure out what might work best for each individual athlete.
I'm curious, like, at what point did you decide that sport nutrition was really the direction you wanted to go with when it came to your master's and PhD? Was that something that initially you wanted to explore while you were still working on your undergrad, or was it something that kind of evolved once you started to kind of get back into sport, as you mentioned, during that undergrad period?
So it was my transition from undergrad into grad school was actually kind of a unique one in that I've been brought into the offices of different faculties during my undergrad saying, Keely, you'd make an excellent grad student. Have you ever thought about grad school? And I remember telling them, not a chance. If I'm going back to school, it's for a professional designation, doctor, physio, whatever it might be. I had zero intention of, how I describe it, going back to school for the sake of going back to school. And then I took a year off after my undergrad. I had been a research assistant for quite a few years, and I realized that research was the only job that I ever had that I liked. So I kept going with it. But really, I had always been quite interested in nutrition, even as a teenager. Again, sport was a big part of my life growing up. So I had always taken quite a keen interest in that. And that only grew as I continued through my undergraduate training, we have a single course in exercise nutrition. And then, of course, when I started training more on a full-time at an elite level, you start to realize just how important this is and how one meal can honestly potentially mess up your training the next day, and how it can influence your training, how it can influence your adaptation and overall your performance.
As you said, parasport's a very understudied area and field. Do you have any dreams or goals, hopefully 5, 10, even more than that, years down the road, where you see hopefully paranutrition and sport nutrition going with a lens on disability?
There's so many places I would like to go. As researchers, though, I think it comes down to not gatekeeping our knowledge. Parasport is a relatively small proportion of the overall population. We think of 15% of the global population has a physical disability. What percentage of those are athletes? It's quite a small number. So if I'm focused on me being one researcher, or even with my small group of researchers that I collaborate with, the amount of para athletes we can reach is quite small. But if we start working with the researchers in Switzerland and the researchers in Australia and the researchers in the States, and we start working together, I think we can start to answer some of these questions that can then benefit all of the nations, benefit the athletes as a whole. So whereas sometimes in science and sometimes in sport, we're so worried about keeping our knowledge, keeping our resources to ourselves, to our nation, to our lab, whatever it might be, I think when it comes to parasport, we really need to build a camaraderie. We really need to build a collaborative network so that we can take advantage of different types of athletes that different researchers have access to. I would love to be able to make recommendations for carbohydrate intake, to make recommendations for protein intake, for supplement intake, for individuals based on their impairment. And we know each individual is going to be a little bit different, even if they have the same clinical diagnosis. But to be able to say, here are the list of things that the research suggests you do, why don't you try them? Right now, we don't even have a list of things to try for the most part, which can make it really challenging. We then have we have para-athletes who are following able-bodied guidelines, and those may or may not be applicable. It could be detrimental to their sport performance. They might be missing out on some benefits. So my dream is for a collaborative network of parasport, paranutrition researchers across the globe who can work together, pool our resources, pool our athletes to actually be able to start to make some recommendations to help these athletes hit their peak performance.
And you also mentioned there as like, it is a subsect of a subsect when we start exploring like nutrition within parasport, but also given the fact that, in the realm of parasport, there are different disabilities, different impacts that individuals may have that kind of impact things like nutrition and performance. Does that kind of make it more challenging to really do a like comprehensive kind of set of guidelines, like you say, like being able to develop some sort of guidelines or kind of a practice to say, hey, this is what would be applicable to you and your disability in your sport, because there's so many different variables within each of these sports for these athletes, whereas on the able-bodied side it would be a bit more generalized.
It makes it super challenging. This is the reason why I think we have a lot of the research that we do have is in spinal cord injury. But even then, we start to look at spinal cord injury, and it's often in a clinical perspective. It's in that first chunk of time post-injury. We are looking at how quickly we can get them out of the hospital, and then we send them on their way. There's not a lot that looks at how can we optimize performance, how can we optimize quality of life in the long term, because there's still a lot of life left after injury or after diagnosis. But I think what I've been trying to do is be less concerned about getting a super homogeneous sample. I'm never going to get a good study if I only want people with a T9 spinal cord injury. It's not going to happen. But rather just being transparent, trying to get as close of a group as I can, whether that's including all people with spinal cord injuries, and then we can manage our analysis a little bit based on whether or not they have motor sensory impairment, where on the spinal cord it is. But that's also kind of why I've done some research in cycling, and I really like working in paracycling, because our sport classes are kind of to an extent broken down based on type of impairment. If we look at, we have our H class, which not as a rule, but largely are spinal cord injuries. And then depending on the numbers, it's going to be higher or lower. T class tends to be neurological, whether that's brain injury, multiple sclerosis, whatever it might be. So in cycling, we tend to start to see these impairment types or these impairment groups cluster together. So then when I do work with paracycling, I can break them out instead of by individual impairment. I can break them out by sport class, at least bike type, which starts to give us a little bit of an idea. And then we can start looking at, maybe we can get more into the weeds a little bit about higher versus lower level of function impairment and how that might impact things.
Keely, completely switching gears for 1 second. We know you love your TV and movies. Would you have a dream actress that could play you in any movie or TV show?
Nathan, you're really putting me on the spot here. I have zero pop culture knowledge. I think my pop culture knowledge goes to about 2009 and then it stops. I'm going to blame it on the injury. That's not really it. But I'm always a big fan of Amanda Bynes' work. Again, showing my early 2000s pop culture knowledge there. But I think Amanda Bynes would probably be my choice.
And Keely, you mentioned before one of the things that got you into paracycling was the notion it's like, oh, you could travel to different places, things like that. What is your favorite travel story that you've had, or maybe favorite destination that you've traveled to as part of being a member on the paracycling team?
I think my favorite place to travel, I have two different favorite places to travel for different reasons. I really enjoyed Hawaii, which as a Canadian, I feel like that's underwhelming because it's not somewhere exotic. It's still in North America. But we went to Hawaii for training camp in January or in February, and it's such a nice break from Canadian winter. The weather's great. You have such a wide variety of terrain. We went with a great group of athletes. But I really enjoy going to the Netherlands. As a cyclist, it's pretty neat because cycling is such a huge part of the culture. There's bike lanes everywhere. There's a separate bike lane beside the highway. In the morning, you see businessmen in suits on their bike to work, little old ladies in their dresses biking to coffee. So it's such a cool way of seeing our sport integrated into these regular lives of people. And actually, my favorite story is from a trip to the Netherlands, where this is it's super cringy, But I had been jet lagged, so I got up at 2 a.m. or whatever, and I couldn't get back to sleep. So I thought I'd go for a walk. You know what they say, if you're not falling asleep, get out of bed. But I forgot to bring my hotel key with me. I'd left my room key open, but I forgot this was a relatively small family-owned hotel, so the front door's locked. So I got locked out. It's 3 a.m. And I sat out there for a while thinking, well, the coach is going to go for a run at 5, so I just need to kill 2 hours. Killing 2 hours at 3 a.m. in Holland is not as easy as you might think. So I started trying, there was a little teeny tiny crack in the front door. So I tried to get a piece of grass in there to set off the motion sensor to open the doors. And I ended up breaking the doors. Eventually, I never did get in through the doors, but I went up the fire escape and pounded on the window of the room that I knew the team physio and the team doctor were in. So now the running joke is that the team has a door repair fund just for me.
Well, between you breaking doors and Nathan blowing fuses in Scotland, I think the paracycling team, there's a bit of extra insurance that needs to go anytime you guys are traveling. Keely, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. This has been phenomenal. Best of luck going forward.
Thanks so much, guys. This was a super fun conversation.
Fantastic interview with Dr. Keely Shaw. Nathan, there were so many different questions I had. I mean, I feel like we could have continued talking to her for another 20 minutes because it's just so fascinating kind of picking her brain on the sport nutrition side of things, but also her experience on the track and on the road, having that unique perspective of being both a track cyclist and a road cyclist. But what really stood out to me was the research aspect and how she talked about the fact there really isn't a lot of research out there, especially when it comes to parasport and nutrition. And hopefully, you know, she's one of these people that is going to change that and be able to continue to push forward, create more research, more applicable research and information for all athletes.
Yeah, it's just really special to see what she's doing now and that impacts that's going to have for years to come. And just getting to know her as a person and as an athlete, she is an absolute fearless competitor. Like the amount of times she's hit the ground, she's hit the pavement, she's just got back up and she's put her heart on her sleeve. And just for her to have that kind of success, but also want to give back and have that passion in a field that's very underrepresented and very unknown is just really, really incredible. And I would love to get your thoughts on just the impacts and importance of having people who are looking at that nutritional aspect, especially for parasports, that's not really been seen yet.
Yeah, you know, in doing research and trying to plan out various documentaries during my time with AMI, especially around parasport, and realizing there really isn't a lot out there, or there's not a lot of new or relevant information or research when it goes into parasports in North America, in Canada, that would really be applicable. It is such a challenge finding that key information. So research has to be done, but I also find it fascinating, as she talked about, she doesn't just want to focus in on the niche of parasport nutrition because it is a subsect of a subsect, but being able to offer more broad information that will be applicable, because when you are dealing with research around disability, well, there are different kind of mechanisms of injury, there are different disability origins and impact for athletes, and then there's the different sports themselves. So it is so complex to be able to do that research, but then also to be able to have that research that you can draw upon and build information and kind of collect things from. So I think there's still a long ways to go there, but there's such a field that is rich and ripe for passionate individuals like Keely to really make a name for themselves in that space. For you, Nathan, I'm turning the tables onto you, though. She is a sport nutritionist. Let's talk about your sport nutrition. How careful are you watching kind of what you're eating, what you're doing when you're training or getting ready for competitions? Are you really counting the calories? Are you going into those micro levels? Are you keeping things on a bit more of a macro scale when it comes to nutrition and diet?
I've always looked at nutrition, especially during this time of the calendar as a little looser, where I'm obviously eating the smarter foods and knowing what's good for the body, what's not good for the body. As Keely mentioned in the interview, was when you've had something bad the day before, because you can feel it on the bike. And especially as I've gotten older, I can't be eating the same foods I ate when I was 20, 21 years old as a swimmer at 30 years old now. So for me, it's really prioritizing and analyzing like what's good for me, what is needed. So really trying to balance every group, getting the proteins that are needed. And especially with cycling, when we're battling thousands and thousands of calories that have been exerted in a ride, in a workout, it's just coming down to realizing that what your body needs and what it should be getting, while still being smart, but also giving you that room to enjoy a little bit here and there. So it's not super strict, but definitely smarter, and really taking a lens into what I need and what I know that's going to be good for me at the end of the day.
I'm a little annoyed with myself that I didn't get a chance to ask Keely this question, but I'm asking it to you now, Nathan. What's your cheat day meal?
I would say some good greasy pizza would be up there, but we do have some spots, especially with like Keely and other members of the team. There's one race we get to do in Italy, at least the last couple of years, that once we're finished racing, we'll get gelato at one of the corner stores or corner shops right by the race course. And oh my, is it just phenomenal and so good. It's one of those things where if you had a great race, it's an amazing way to celebrate post-race. But usually the times I've had it, especially in Italy, it's been after some tough results. So it's that little thing that can bring the spirits up as you're in the pits of despair after missing out on a medal or just having a poor performance. So we love our gelato on the team, and it comes in clutch so many times.
Well, and too bad they haven't just set it up yet that it's like right on the course, so you could just have a pick me up on the race and get some calories in you, get some extra fuel to push you over that finish line. But I mean, that's a pretty good consolation prize, if you're not getting the results you want. Yeah, you go have a pretty good gelato over there in Italy to kind of to tend to the wounds and the bruised ego on the race. But for yourself, do you ever because she is a member of the team, are you guys doing any of these kind of group meals? Are you ever kind of checking out what she's having and then feeling a little bit self-conscious about eating in front of her? It's making sure, I'm always eating healthy. I'm not picking out or getting an extra carb or two that I don't necessarily need on this day.
A little bit, but there's myself and another athlete I'm going to keep anonymous that are known as the eaters on the team. So especially different team halls or hotels that we're staying at, we're kind of eating the scraps that everyone else doesn't want to have. So I feel like there's been little bits of judgment here and there, but at the end of the day, if you're burning the calories, you need to bring the calories in, right? So that's my justification on the matter, is just I need to eat to be a growing cyclist, right? So
you gotta as long as you keep racking up those medals, they get heavy. You need more calories to be able to hold them all up around your neck. So it's definitely justified, Nathan. But that's all the time we have on the show today. Thank you for watching and listening at home. Be sure to catch us on YouTube or check out the podcast as well if you want to listen to us on audio. All our episodes are up there wherever you listen to your podcast. Take care. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Parasport Nation. Like and subscribe to the channel to follow us now.